Hey everybody, as we approach the end of the calendar year, it's typical for a lot of people to start setting up goals for the following year, and that's what we're going to do with this particular presentation entitled Graduate Student Success Goals for 2021. And now we're going to set up goals for the next year, but hopefully goals for your entire academic career. Right, so we're going to talk about the importance of creating a 5-year plan, as well as the 3 areas of academic professionalism. And then we're going to talk about creating a template for your CV, and then some tips for filling out that CV even as a young graduate student. Right. So when it comes to the 5-year plan, you might want to create a long-term plan about what you hope to accomplish during your time in graduate school. Right, and this is just a general idea of what you are planning to get done, and a broad overview of this plan might consist of the following. So year one, hopefully you're completing your coursework, and if you're in a field like economics where you have qualifying exams at the end of the year, then make sure you pass those, and it's most efficient if you can pass those on the first go around so that you only have to study for and take them once, right? So again, here in year one, that should be your main focus. And then in year two, hopefully you're going to be teaching a class or at least starting your work as a teaching assistant. And then you want to start thinking about the kind of research that you want to be doing for your dissertation and hopefully looking for a mentor or picking a dissertation advisor, right? So that's kind of like the main idea, the main goal behind year two, in addition to finishing up whatever coursework that is required of you. Year three, hopefully you have started writing your first paper and at least attended a conference where you've served as a discussant, right, or some kind of contributory role in that particular conference. And then by year four, you've hopefully finished that first paper and presented it at a conference, and then possibly sent it out for publication based on maybe some of the edits or critiques you got on that at that particular conference. And of course, by year five, you should be defending your dissertation and entering the job market, right? So that's a pretty typical 5-year plan, as again, just a broad overview of it. So here's kind of a more detailed look at that plan, right? So rather than look at this from calendar year to beginning of the calendar year to the end of the calendar year, we're going to look at it from kind of the beginning of the academic year to the end of the academic year. So with that in mind, right, let's say that again in your first year, your goal should be passing those courses, right? So here at UC Riverside, if you're on the quarter system, that means that you should pass all 3 quarters, and then in August or whenever those qualifying exams for your field are given, hopefully you'll pass those as well. And then in year two, again, you might want to start working as a teaching assistant, and you also might want to start thinking about maybe offering to work with or help your department student organization. So again, there's a department economics club that is run by undergraduate students, and occasionally they do meetings, and you might want to ask them if you can give a presentation at one of their meetings, or maybe it's about something that interests you in terms of your research, or maybe it's something that is just what they can expect when they go to graduate school based off of your experience there so far. Okay, and then you can start doing research for your dissertation if you haven't already. Somewhere towards the beginning or middle of that first year, you might want to offer to teach your first class in the summer if that's available to you. And then towards the end of that second year, make sure that you are preparing to teach that first class and then actually spend a good amount of time, not only in preparation, but while teaching the class, making sure that you are doing as good a job as you can. All right, and then in year three, again, sign up for a conference and offer to serve as a discussant towards the beginning of that academic year, and also offer any professors who are looking for help with a grant proposal or maybe a book chapter. So if they're editing a volume and you have some research that you've been working on that you could contribute to that volume, right, then that might be a great way to get a line on your CV, all right, without necessarily having to go through as stringent of a refereed process. All right, you can also start thinking about how you want to present your research at a conference, right? Generally speaking, you might want to go and attend that conference first, where you're maybe serving as a discussant before you actually offer your own research up for review, right? Just so you can see how it's done and maybe feel a little bit more comfortable when you are presenting your first paper, right? But again, if you feel comfortable enough there in year three and you've gotten your paper far enough along, then you might want to offer to serve as more than just a discussant, but also present a paper as well. But that is, again, depending on how far along you are with that first initial stages of your research, right? And then hopefully by February, you're starting to write your first paper or chapter of your dissertation. And again, in the beginning or middle of that third year, maybe offer to teach another class over the summer, right? And also you could offer to serve on a department or university graduate student committee. So there's a lot of committees that are staffed by graduate students. And again, you can maybe add a line to your CV under that service category by offering to serve on one of those committees, right? Again, make sure you do a really good job preparing for and teaching any class that you might be teaching over the summer, and then continue working on your paper or dissertation there throughout the summer. Right, and then of course by year 4 you should have signed up for a conference and offer to present a paper at this time rather than just attend or serve as a discussant. Right, again, keep offering to serve on a department or university graduate student committee if they're available. If there are any professional development workshops, sometimes those are pretty common here at UC Riverside, right? They have like Teaching Development Day where you can learn how to be a better teacher, or they actually have conferences or workshops that are set up around engaging in the academic job market, right? So, you know, if you can get a chance, attend those as well, because those are going to make you more viable options when you actually do get on that job market. Again, attend the conference, and this time presenting your paper, right? After that conference, make sure you take the critiques from the people who are at your particular session at that conference and use them to improve your paper, and then edit it and submit it for publication. Right, continue working on your dissertation, and again, make sure that you are preparing for any classes that you're teaching and teach that class. During that summer between your 4th and 5th year, if you're on this 5-year plan, you might want to start preparing your job market materials. So getting your CV together, your statement of teaching philosophy. Make sure that you have your job market presentation together and it's kind of well practiced. And start asking professors for letters of recommendation. Right? And then year 5 is mostly about finishing up your dissertation and entering that academic job market, right? So again, you should have been working on these papers, particularly the ones that you are kind of sending out for publication, should be chapters in your dissertation, right? And hopefully by the end of, middle to end of year 5, you're going to have that dissertation completed and defended. And then, of course, you're going to graduate, get your PhD, and then move to your first job. So that's a typical 5-year plan. Some students take a little bit longer than that, like maybe around 6 years. Some students do a little bit faster, like in around 4 years. I have heard of students doing it in 3 years, although that's pretty uncommon, right? I was able to get it done in 4. So here's kind of a look at my 4-year plan and how it worked out. When I was a graduate student at West Virginia University, I started working as a teaching assistant right away. So that's something that you do initially as you come in. But again, my main goal that first year was to pass those first classes that first year. So those theory classes in the economics program is what I was trying to get through in that first year. Right. So again, make sure I pass those. We were on the semester system, so passed them in December and April when those classes ended, right? But I was also really concentrated on doing a good job as a teaching assistant because I knew that would open up more opportunities for me, right? And it certainly did. So actually in my very first week as a teaching assistant in September, the professor was going to leave for a conference, was going to cancel class. But I told him, rather than canceling like our second class ever, why don't you let me take over? I'll be happy to teach that class. And he was a little bit reluctant at first because, again, it was my very first week as a teaching assistant. He didn't know that I really knew anything about teaching, but I assured him that I could do it and even kind of came up with a lesson plan to which he finally agreed. And so in my first week as a teaching assistant, I ended up teaching a class of about 200 students. And that kind of impressed that professor. And so then I asked them later on, hey, if you don't mind, I'd like to give some review sessions before each of your exams, kind of help these students out. And he agreed to that as well, right? So I ended up giving those review sessions. And I continued to do that when I taught for the next professor in my second semester. And because I had so much experience teaching review sessions and teaching that one class, I actually got offered the opportunity to teach my first summer class there in my first year as a graduate student. Right, so I spent the first part of that summer teaching that first summer's class and again preparing for it, making sure I did a good job, right? And then I spent the rest of that summer studying for the qualifying exams at a ridiculous pace of maybe 14 hours a day or whatever it took, right? Again, I spent all day, every day really studying for those exams, right? Make sure I could pass them my first go around, which I was able to do in August, right? So in my beginning my second year, I started working as a teaching assistant now for the upper division or graduate classes that the first year graduate students were taking. And during my time as teaching that summer class, I actually developed a pretty close relationship with one of the students who was really excited about economics. So I offered to teach him in a one-on-one directed individual study class, which at least at West Virginia University, they allowed me to do as a graduate student. So I developed a one-on-one class, which was basically just us coming up with a series of papers and books for him to read, and then we get together and discuss them, and he writes some papers on them, which I grade. Right. So again, by the middle of my second year, I already had one class taught and developed another one-on-one class, which I then taught in that spring semester of that second year. Right. So by the end of my first 2 years, I actually had two different classes taught. So it's kind of a good boost for my CV early on. Right. And then again, I spent most of that second year passing my courses. So in the economics graduate program, you take your theory classes during the first year, you take your field classes during the second year. And so I spent a lot of time focusing on those field classes. And then at West Virginia University, you also have to pass field qualifying exams. So I made sure to study for those exams and pass those as well. Another thing that I did was during those field classes, I developed a close relationship with one of the professors who had actually known from my days as an undergraduate student there at that university. And so I asked him to work or asked him if he wouldn't mind being my dissertation advisor. Right. And then I kind of started working on, or at least started researching for my dissertation, kind of the idea that I wanted to pursue. Right. Now, year two was kind of an unusual year for me. I was actually diagnosed with cancer towards the end of year two and had to undergo a lot of chemotherapy. So I didn't teach a class during my second year of the program over the summer because I was kind of busy working on my recovery to the point where like I didn't want to offer to teach a class in case something happened with my chemotherapy schedule that wouldn't allow me to be in the classroom during that time, right? So again, I was just focused on studying and passing those exams. But what I did end up doing was I had that my dissertation advisor ended up teaching a summer class to K through 12 teachers. It's kind of like a continuing education class about how to incorporate economics into their kindergarten through 12th grade classes. And so I ended up working as a teaching assistant for that class, which was a great experience because I ended up actually teaching that class later on, taking it over completely from that professor when he moved on in the years to follow. So at the beginning of year three, I was scheduled to teach one large section, Introduction to Microeconomics class, but another graduate student is actually leaving the program, and he was scheduled to teach a large section, Introduction to Macroeconomics class. So I actually offered to the department, hey, I can teach that class too if you want, which actually gave me the experience of teaching two large section classes during my third year of my graduate school experience. And that was good for a couple reasons. One is I personally felt like I was making up for that class I had to miss over the summer because of the whole cancer thing. But two, it looks really good on the CV that I taught two large section classes in one semester while being a graduate student at the school here in my third year, right? So again, I spent most of that first semester of my third year focused on teaching those two large classes and also just working on my dissertation. Right. I think there was also one or two final courses that we had to complete. So like one or two electives to kind of fill out our graduate student requirements. So I think I took both those classes in that first semester as well and was able to complete those. And then in January, I got an offer to start working on a book chapter for an edited volume from my dissertation advisor. So again, I was working on my dissertation and I was also trying to finish out that book chapter, which consisted of some interviews and, again, some research on policy in the state of West Virginia. And so by the end of that second semester of my third year, I had finished that book chapter and got publication credit on my CV. And then I was also offered to teach another class over the summer, for which I was able to do so. Right. During the summer, I was also focusing a lot on writing the second chapter of my dissertation, having finished that first chapter towards the end of that second semester, my third year. Right. And then during that summer period, I was also approached or during the late spring, early summer, I was approached by the department because I had taught so many classes at this point, and had developed such a strong relationship with our undergraduate students to ask, I was asked to kind of come up with some different upper division economic electives because the school was suffering from kind of having a shortage of variety of upper division economic electives for the students to take. So I did some research and looked into this field of behavioral economics, which at the time was pretty new, and offered to develop and teach a behavioral economics upper division elective for the department at West Virginia University, and actually got the chair at the time to agree. Right. So again, I spent a lot of time over the summer, in addition to writing my dissertation, kind of developing this new course, which not only hadn't been taught at West Virginia University before, but for which at the time there was really no good textbook for. And it says had to collect a lot of papers, right? Look up CVs of other schools that had taught this class to see what they were doing for it, and kind of put together a class based on what the CVs at comparable institutions look like. So then in the beginning of my fourth year, I started teaching that new elective, and I'd also finished by the end of the summer my second chapter of the dissertation. And so I started working on that third chapter, hoping to get it done towards the middle of that particular year. Right. During that fourth year, I'd also signed up for a conference where I was going to present a paper on teaching ideas that I had created, right? And I attended that conference towards the end of that first semester, that fourth year, right? And presented a paper. And during that time, I was also focused on going out on the job market because I was determined to finish in 4 years, right? So I was doing interviews and flyouts with Florida State University and Penn State University and the University of Charleston in West Virginia, right? Towards the end of that first semester, I'd wrapped up that teaching and I'd actually gotten a job offer at Florida State University. So that was good because it kind of ended that job market experience for me a little bit early, which freed up a lot of time to do other stuff. Right, so I really spent a lot of the end of that first semester working on my dissertation, and actually I finished my complete dissertation draft by the end of December on that of my fourth year. So I kind of was very proud of the fact that I had it done, and I remember one of the other graduate students came back after the Christmas break and saw my completed dissertation sitting on the desk and like, wow, that's awesome. That motivates me to do it. So again, that's one of those things is that when you're working together with your fellow graduate students, right, kind of look to each other for motivation. So I look to other graduate students, and occasionally they look to me as well. Right. I was also asked to give a presentation at the West Virginia Legislative Look Ahead based on that book that I contributed a chapter to. So that turned out to be another line on my CV that I didn't necessarily expect at the time when I agreed to work on that book chapter, which is kind of a good lesson, is that you want to kind of open yourself up to these opportunities. If somebody gives you an opportunity, I would, again, assuming that your time permits, definitely jump on it and take it because it could lead to more opportunities in the future. As we talked about with me working as a teaching assistant at that summer teaching workshop led to a pretty lucrative career opportunity in the future as I continued to teach that class. And again, working on that book chapter led to not only a publication, but a presentation, both of which look pretty good on the CV. And then I spent the early part of that spring semester editing my dissertation. I defended that dissertation in April and graduated in May, and then moved to Tallahassee, Florida to start my job at Florida State in June, right? So again, this was kind of my 4-year plan. Again, it takes usually an average of about 5 years to get through a graduate program, but you can get through it in 4 if you hustle, right? Or again, it's no shame in people taking a little bit longer than that if needed, especially in today's day and age as the job market gets more and more competitive, right? But again, what you want to be thinking about through this is do a great job on your coursework. Make sure you pass your qualifying exams, and if you can do so the first time around, that's going to free up a lot of time for you. Right, make sure you offer to teach classes because that's going to be an important part of an academic job if that's what you're looking for, right? And do a great job teaching those classes. Really spend a lot of time preparing for that class and working with your students and developing a good relationship with your students, right? And then from then on, make sure that you are working on things for publication and looking at potential conferences where you can present this research at. As long as you are kind of doing that at a pretty steady pace there, then you should be well geared for that job market, well positioned for it as it comes around. as it comes time to go out and actually present your work. All right, so that's kind of a quick look at the plans. And again, you don't necessarily need to, as you're making a plan, know everything that's going to happen over the next 5 years. Again, a lot of that stuff is stuff that I didn't exactly know was going to be coming my way. But it's, again, just a good idea to have a general outline of a plan and then kind of start following it and then update that plan as these new opportunities come around. So with that in mind, let's talk about the 3 areas of academic professionalism. So generally speaking, as if an academic job is what you're going for, right, as a graduate student and as a young academic, there are 3 areas that you really need to focus on, right? That is research, teaching, and service, right? So let's talk about what that research component is, right? Now, if you're looking for a research job, particularly one at a big R1 university like the University of California or like a Florida State or West Virginia University or a place like that, right? Well, then you really would need to focus on this first area, which is that research and scholarly activity, right? And of course, the number 1 area here is peer-reviewed papers, right? If you can get a peer-reviewed publication by the time that you graduate with your PhD, that's going to be a huge leg up on the competition who doesn't have those peer-reviewed papers already published when they're out there competing with you in the job market, right? So again, you really want to kind of be working on papers to send out. And remember that it takes a long time to get a paper published, even after it's finished, right? Because you might send it off to a journal and they might take like 2 or 3 months to get back to you, and then, or even longer sometimes. And then once they get back to you, there's edits that they're going to want to see made. And so you need to take the time to complete those edits and then send it back to the journal. And then again, there's another lengthy referee process, right? So again, it might take anywhere between 8 months to a year to actually have it go into publication or be accepted after you've sent it out the first time. Right, so make sure that you're working on those papers early and sending them out as soon as you can. Right, as one professor said to a colleague once while I was standing there, he says, you know, whatever you do, get it out. Don't leave it on your desk. It does absolutely no good sitting on your desk collecting dust, right? At least once it's out and sent to the journal, right? It's undergoing that referee process. You've got something in the works, right? Again, if you get offered a chance to publish a book chapter, right, they're not as prized or as well received as those peer-reviewed publications, but at the same time, it's another good line to have on a CV, and it could lead to some opportunities like presentations and conferences later. Again, make sure you get the experience of presenting at conferences. One, because that's another line on your CV, but then another is because it gives you the experience you need so that you have the confidence necessary when you give your job market presentation. Also, if you're not ready to present at a conference, you can still serve as a discussant or even organize or chair a session at a conference. Right? Again, those are additional lines on your CV and shows that you are engaging in that kind of professional service. Right? At the very least, make sure you attend a conference. Also, you might want to think about writing any grants or grant proposals that come your way, even if it's something like a travel grant for a conference, right? You at least get the experience of writing grants, right? And finally, if you get an opportunity to referee papers, right, then that would be included under that research or scholarly activity as well. And generally, so these are opportunities that are created, right? In other words, what I mean by that is that the more that you actually start publishing, then the more opportunities you're going to get to referee, right? The more you're working on book chapters and papers, well, then the more you're going to have to present at conferences. So this all kinds of kind of feeds on itself. The second area is teaching, right? That could include developing and teaching a new course, being completely responsible for teaching your own courses, or serving as a teaching assistant as you're working for a professor in a course that they're teaching. Again, it could involve creating a one-on-one directed individual study class with a student. Here at UC Riverside in the economics department, those are called Econ 190 classes. So you could talk to an academic advisor here about developing your own. I'm not sure if graduate students at UC Riverside are allowed to develop their own, but I know that I was allowed to develop my own at West Virginia University, right? And of course, attend teaching workshops and conferences is another way that you can kind of improve your teaching game, even if you're not able to teach your own course immediately. And they offer these not only with it here at the University of California, Riverside, but there's some that are kind of national or across the country as well. And then finally, the third area is service. And this is one that can be kind of difficult to get your foot in the door as a graduate student. because this usually means kind of working at for department or university committees. And as a graduate student, those are kind of more limited, but there are graduate student committees that you can serve on. So as part of this mentorship program, you have kind of peer mentors, right? That is a line that they can put on their CV under kind of university service, right? So now that you're going through this peer mentor program, you might want to think about becoming a peer mentor yourself rather than just a mentee, right? So that you can again contribute to your service area of the CV that way, right? A lot of departments have a department student organization. So like here at University of California, Riverside, the economics department has a economics club that the students run, and you can offer to give a presentation to that student organization, right? Again, it could be on your research, or it could be something like, hey, here's how here was my experience in applying for graduate school for those of you who are interested, and here's what you might want to expect in your first year of a graduate program. And that's a presentation that you can give almost right away. So like towards the end of your first year or at the beginning of your second year, right, you can give that presentation, include that as a line on your CV as well, right, under that university or department service. And I mean, that's a good presentation to give, because a lot of students who voluntarily join something like an economics club and who are going to these economics club meetings, those are students who are usually interested in maybe going to graduate school for economics or some kind of graduate school. And so again, it's not only a good thing for you to do in terms of improving your CV, but it's a good thing for the students as well, right? So it actually provides a lot of value to them. Again, you can offer to give presentations for any other student groups. For example, as a professor here, I've actually been approached by some student groups to give presentations on my research, and then I've also just offered these same student groups to kind of help them with whatever events that they have going on, and that includes like being a moderator at a panel with the Young Republicans at UCR and the Young Democrats at UCR and the Libertarians at UCR. So they kind of all each had a representative on this panel, and then I was kind of the moderator, so I asked questions and kept things civil and things like that. And then finally, you might want to keep an eye out for any professional community service, right? So I'll give you examples of some of those that I did during my time. There was a couple local high school economic teachers who ended up really needing a lot of help learning economics so that they could teach it to their students. Because for those of you who don't know, sometimes the person who teaches economics at your high school doesn't have a background in economics, right? Sometimes they're like a tennis coach and they needed somebody to teach an economics class and they were the only ones available. And so what I did was I actually worked with a few of these teachers in kind of tutoring them with any help that they needed in going through the high school economics textbook so that they could then teach their students better. Also gave personal finance presentations to at-risk youth here in Riverside, kind of explaining to them how to save and invest money, right? So those are kind of community service opportunities that you can put on your CV because they're kind of related to your profession, right? So, you know, there's a lot of community service that you can do, like you can pick up trash along the highway or whatever, but that's not something that's going to kind of strike a chord as much with whoever it is who's you're trying to impress with your CV. Has stuff that's actually related to your field, right? So like, again, tutoring people in your discipline, like tutoring high school teachers in your discipline, or again, giving a discipline related presentation to the public is something that's going to bolster your CV more than maybe something that involves just more manual labor or something like that. Having said that, don't be afraid to put any community service that you do on your CV because it certainly doesn't look bad to have that stuff on there. It's just not going to be as favorable as having that stuff that's kind of related to your profession. All right. So speaking of CV, right, what I hope you will do is create a CV or at least a template for your CV right now. I know that you know, a lot of people in this mentorship program are first years graduate students. You're like, well, I don't really have a lot to put on there. I just kind of been focusing on getting those classes out of the way. But that's a good reason to create this general template now, is because when you do so, it's going to motivate you to start putting stuff on your CV, right? You look at this blank CV with all these areas you can fill, and you're going to start thinking, well, how can I start filling this thing up? And that's going to kind of motivate you to start adding lines, which is never a bad thing to do, and it's never too early to start, right? So when you're putting together your CV, you put your kind of personal information at the top, right? So again, there's kind of different templates for how you can do that. But one thing that's pretty standard is the first thing under that is your education. And you want to list that by degree. If you're in this mentorship program, then you definitely have a bachelor's degree. Some of you might already have a master's degree, right? I guess a lot of you would be working either on that master's or that PhD, right? So again, you can put what you do is you put the degree in descending order from the highest to the lowest, right? And then you put the degree first, followed by the department that that degree is in, right? And then you put the university at which you got that degree, and then the date at which that degree was either achieved or the date in which it is expected, right? So, for example, if you already have your bachelor's and master's degree, you can put those dates there and then say, the PhD is expected to be attained in, say, May of 2023 or something like that, right? Depending on wherever it is, whenever it is that you graduate. All right. From there, you can put down your professional appointments. Now, for most of you right now, that's probably just going to be serving as a teaching assistant, right, for the University of California, Riverside. But if you've ever had any lecture positions or postdocs or anything like that, you can also include those as well, right? So, of course, you probably won't have a postdoc until you finish your PhD, right? But at some point, you might be offered a position to work as a lecturer for, say, a community college while you're here, and you can put that under there, under those professional appointments as well for right now, right? And then from there, you can start putting down your research, including your publications. That might be any referee journal articles. Again, if you can get at least one of those accomplished by the time you graduate, that's going to give you a leg up in the job market. Or books or book chapters that you've been working on, or maybe you've helped a professor edit a volume. So you might be like an associate editor of a volume that maybe your dissertation advisor is putting together. You can put that there as well. And finally, you should definitely have at least some working papers. So these are papers that you're working on that are, again, not out for publication yet, or maybe they are, right? And so again, you put the kind of the title of that paper and kind of its stage of development, right? So if you've already submitted it for publication, again, you put the title of that paper in parentheses, say submitted, right? Or if it's under review, right? Or maybe it's revise and resubmit, meaning that it's already been returned to you once and you're kind of resubmitting it, right? So whatever stage that paper is in, you kind of put that in parentheses, right next to that paper title. All right. Now, also, you want a section for awards and honors. So again, you want to focus on professional distinctions here. Like if you work really hard as a teaching assistant, maybe you'll get an outstanding teaching assistant award, which I actually was able to get at West Virginia University. So that's something you put under awards, right? Maybe your paper has won like a graduate student paper award. And if so, make sure you put that under there as well. But you want to put things like academic accomplishments. Like nobody at the job market is really going to care that you made the dean's list as an undergraduate, right? Because again, most people who are getting their PhDs are people who did well as an undergraduate, right? That's how they got into graduate school to begin with, right? So you don't want to put those academic accomplishments down as much as you want to put those professional distinctions or awards that you've received during your time as a graduate student, right? Any grants and fellowships you definitely want to include. Any invited talks that you have been asked to give, right? Any conference activity or participation. This could include any conference sessions that you've organized. So if you've kind of chaired a session or organized a panel, that would be included there. If you've, organize an entire conference. Sometimes as a graduate student, you can organize like a graduate student conference, right? That's something that you could put there as well. Any papers that you presented at conferences, again, make sure you put that conference presentation down. And finally, even if you just served as a discussant at a conference, that's something you can put down there as well. Now, then, next thing might be a little controversial. Some people say if you just attended the conference and you didn't present at it, right, then you don't necessarily want to put that down on your CV. However, at this stage in the game, I don't think that's a bad thing to do. There are a few conferences that I just attended rather than presented at or discussed at that I do have down there because I did end up being pretty active at that conference. So even though I didn't present a paper or formally work as a discussant, right, I did kind of end up helping do a lot of things at that conference, like be very active in discussions with some of the sessions that I went to, and then I also ended up joining some graduate student panels and kind of served on those panels in a non-official capacity, right? So, and that's stuff that kind of I put down in that line of the CV. So, so I listed the conference, right? I said attendee only, but did work on the graduate student panel or something like that, right? So again, some opportunities can arise at the conference where you end up doing a lot more at that conference than you anticipated, and that's something that you can kind of include in your description of your attendance at that conference. If you're giving any campus or department talks, that's something else that you could put down. And again, that's something that you might have to take some initiative to do, right? So again, you might have to actually contact the Econ Club and ask, hey, are you looking for somebody to give a presentation? Because I'm happy to give a presentation about this, right? Or again, if the university is having, say, maybe a graduate student development day, right, you can kind of talk about or ask to give a presentation about your experience as a graduate student. Stuff like that could, as stuff that adds up on your CV that, again, you have to kind of make happen or look for to make happen by offering your services here, because you might not necessarily be asked. But if you are asked, make sure you take advantage of those opportunities. Also, you're going to be putting teaching experience. This could be classes that you created yourself, like when I created that behavioral economics class at West Virginia University. Classes taught, so classes that you're solely responsible for teaching, and then your experience as a teaching assistant can go here as well. Right. If you worked as a research assistant, make sure you include that experience as well. Or if you are in a field that works in a lab, make sure you include any lab work that you have been a part of. Right. Make sure you include that under that research experience part of your CV. All right. And then there's that service part. So this includes service to the profession. So that includes journals that you've edited. So if you've been asked to be an editor of a journal, which again might be rare as a young graduate student, but certainly possible, then make sure you include that. If you've been asked to be a referee for a journal article, right, then that's something that you could include there as well. Product or textbook reviews are something that, again, you may be asked to do as a graduate student, right? So you might get a email from like McGraw-Hill saying, hey, we have this new student learning software or learning management software that we need people to review. Like it might, when I say review, like they might ask you to kind of access that software and go through a trial run and then give you and then like respond to a survey with your personal feedback about it, right? Those don't really take a whole lot of time. You might be able to do it in a day, or if it's a week-long course, sometimes that they ask you to kind of contribute to, right? Then again, maybe a couple hours each day for that week. And again, it's something that you can put under your CV under this professional service. Textbook reviews is another one, right? You might be asked to review a chapter of a textbook to make sure that everything's accurate and give your personal feedback on it. And again, you might be asked that as a graduate student, and that's something that you could do as well. And then membership or leadership in professional organizations. So there's a whole bunch of professional organizations out there. You know, there's the ASSA, there's the Southern Economic Journal Association. There's all kinds of each journal pretty much has an association almost, and it's again, you can become a member of these different associations for a relatively small fee as a graduate student. That fee tends to go up as you are no longer a graduate student, and you can actually serve in leadership roles in those professional organizations as well. Although as a graduate student that can be quite rare, but not necessarily impossible. I do know that the Association of Private Enterprise and Education has a lot of young graduate students serving in leadership roles within that organization, right? So again, something you might want to think about. Any department or university service, again, that could be if you're a membership of a graduate student committee, or again, any event participation that you contribute to, whether it's teaching development day or graduate student development day, or any event that your university holds that you've contributed to in some way, you want to include that under that department or university service. Right. Again, any talks to the public or community outreach you do could be included under community service, right? And then professional development lectures that you attend, right? So like here at UC Riverside, you can actually attend programs over the summer that are related to things like teaching online. I know I've received a certificate here by participating in one of those programs. Or there's other kinds of training programs available, so how to use a particular software, or again, how to teach more effectively, right? Always keep a lookout or an eye out for those emails coming your way about these types of programs. And if you have the time to attend, make sure you do so, because not only is it a line on your CV, but it's also going to enhance your ability to do things like teach online or teach face-to-face better in the future. Finally, if you speak multiple languages, you can include those languages that are spoken, and then have a list of references, which are usually the people who write your letters of recommendation. All right, so now that you've got that template for your CV created, you want to really start thinking about filling it out, right? And here's my best recommendations based on my experience, is that if you're a teaching assistant, or if you have a job as a research assistant, or maybe both, then do the best job that you absolutely can. And because it's easy to kind of overlook that, right? Because you're so focused on your coursework and your own research that some people just do the bare minimum when it comes to being a teaching assistant. Like, all right, my professor says that I need to hold like 3 office hours a week, so here are my 3 office hours, and that's all they say I need to do, so that's all I'm doing, right? Well, if you do that, you'll fulfill your requirement, but you won't necessarily get the most you can in terms of creating new opportunities from that position. I told you before that, I offered to teach a class in my very first week as a teaching assistant, and then I offered to give review sessions. I wasn't asked to do any of those things, right? But in offering to do those things, right, it really helped me give the department the confidence to allow me to start teaching classes early. And because I taught so many classes and started so early and did such a good job as a teaching assistant, I ended up winning the Outstanding Teaching Assistant Award, right? So again, I really helped fill out my CV, not only in terms of an award, but more classes that I was able to teach, and getting an opportunity to again teach 2 large lecture classes in the same semester as a graduate student actually looked really good on that CV when I was applying for jobs as a teaching professor at these big universities like Florida State and Penn State. I got actually job offers from both. I chose the Florida State one, and the person who was responsible for the search committee at Penn State University said that the main reason why I got an offer from them was because I had this experience teaching large classes as a graduate student. And I was one of the only graduate students they saw who had that kind of experience. Right. And again, I got the opportunity to teach a large class as a graduate student because I did such a good job teaching a small class. And I got that opportunity to teach that small class because I did such a good job as a teaching assistant. Right. So again, do the best job you can, offer to hold extra office hours, offer to hold extra review sessions, right? Do whatever it is you can to impress the person that you're working for, so that when the department asks, is this somebody who's qualified and able to teach their own class, right? They can look at you and without a question say, absolutely, right? Again, don't be afraid to ask to contribute more to your TA or RA job, right? So again, that might involve teaching extra review sessions. Maybe you offer to do a little extra grading, right? Whatever it is, right? Don't be afraid to ask to contribute more as long as your time allows, because that's going to lead to opportunities in the future, right? Asking to work for that summer program for my professor ended up creating a new summer job for me that I was able to make a pretty good amount of money and add some lines to my CV with later on. Make sure you interact with undergraduate students. So as you're teaching your own class, right, get to know your students and look for opportunities to get involved with them, right? Again, that might involve developing an individual study course. So if a student comes to you and says, hey, I really liked the lecture today, I'm really interested in this part of economics, and it's an area that you're also interested in, say, well, I've read all these books on this. If you like, I can lend you these books and we can develop a class around it. And in doing so, again, you can kind of get credit for creating your own individual study course. Now, again, I want you, before you take me up on that advice, make sure that that's something that your department allows here at UC Riverside. I know my department allowed it at West Virginia University. I'm not sure how it works here at UCR. Again, if you offer to give talks to student groups, chances are they're going to take you up on it. A lot of student groups are just kind of looking for activities to fill out the quarter or the academic year. And so if you if you offer to do those kinds of things, they'll be more than happy to take you up on it, particularly the stuff that's related to their development. Like, again, a brief talk about what it's like to prepare for maybe the GRE, or what it's like to apply for graduate school, or what their first year of graduate school is like. Again, pay attention to university events. If you are like the faculty at UCR, then you get a flood of emails about the different events that the university is offering. and look for ways to get involved or contribute, right? So actually reply to some of these emails or take them up on their offers to get involved, right? Because again, that's only going to fill out your CV further. Right, and then finally, keep track of major conferences and find ways to attend or participate in those conferences. Right, again, those conference presentations are not only going to look good on the CV, but they're also going to help you be more prepared for when you actually give your academic job market talks. So the general advice from people who kind of specialize in preparing graduate students for the job market is say that you want to be looking for ways to contribute a line to your CV every month. Now, with that in mind, I want you to keep in mind that that's probably going to be more of an average than something that actually happens every month, right? Especially during your first couple years as a graduate student, right? So again, there's things that you're doing right now, like working as a teaching assistant or maybe, again, getting involved with student groups that you could contribute to your CV, right? But again, just think about maybe trying to contribute a line every month as an average. So some months you might have 2, right? Some months you might have 0, but as long as it averages out to 1 line a month, then you are kind of on pace to position yourself well for the job market. So again, don't get stressed out if a month goes by where you haven't contributed a line, or even if a couple months have gone by where you haven't contributed a line. But if, as long as you're taking these steps that I'm advising you with now in terms of doing the best job you can as a teaching assistant and asking to do more and getting involved with the undergraduate students and looking for university events and keeping track of conferences and, as always, researching and writing, right? Then as long as you're doing all those things, then you're going to be adding to that CV at an average of probably about a line every month, if not more. All right. And then the final step is start researching and writing. That's something that you should always be doing. Right, so as a graduate student, once you get past your first year in those qualifying exams, right, you should always be thinking about research, writing, and sending things off to publications. Again, it doesn't do any good sitting on your desk. Get it under review, and then when it gets back to you, make sure you make the edits and get it back under review again. Again, the sooner you can get it back under review, the sooner that you're going to finally get that acceptance, right? And so this was a piece of advice that was given to me from another graduate student, a colleague of mine, over at Duquesne University. He says publishing is at least partly just a numbers game. And what we mean by that is that there's kind of a home or a journal for every paper, right? So in terms of racking up the number of peer-reviewed publications, right, it's really just about, again, submitting papers. And the more papers you submit, then the more publications you're going to get. You might not necessarily get them at the highest journals depending on the quality of the paper, but again, as people have often said, there is a home for every paper. There's a journal somewhere out there that is going to accept it at some point, right? So again, just get them out there, get them submitted, and the more papers you have in the pipeline, then the more publications you're going to get. Again, it really is just a numbers game. So make sure you're out there constantly working on those papers and submitting them. And they don't necessarily have to be huge endeavors, right? So maybe while you're working on your dissertation, you are also working on maybe a new teaching idea that you created for your class, and you want to share it with the world, right? Well, again, you can write up a short, maybe 7 or 8 page paper about how that teaching idea was used and the kind of results you've gotten from it. And again, submit that for publication in a teaching journal, right? Again, it doesn't count for as much as maybe a high-level publication in one of the top journals, but it is a peer-reviewed publication that looks good on the CV as you're out there applying for jobs. And those teaching papers look good for those small liberal arts colleges if that's a kind of job that you're looking for as well, right? So again, get out there writing and submitting. All right, so that's it for this particular presentation, right? Just kind of give you some ideas of things that you want to be doing as you are setting out on your graduate school career here. And again, as we are ending this calendar year and we're making goals for our future year, you might want to think about putting together that 4 or 5 year plan. And again, starting to put together a CV template that you can start filling out and adding lines to. Again, just having that template is something that's going to encourage you to start adding lines. And as you're going to notice, once you start adding lines to that CV, it's going to be even more motivation to add even more lines in the future. All right, so if you have any questions about anything, just make sure that you email me, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have. Right, just joab.corey@ucr.edu. And again, I'll be happy to send you copies of my CV or copies of, if you're looking for example of a presentation that I've given to student groups or something like that, then I'll be happy to send you that as well. Just let me know what you want or what you're looking for, and I'll be happy to share it with you. Right. So again, just let me know if you need anything, and I hope you have a great holiday break, and I hope you have a productive next year. Take care.